What's up, Reapers? Welcome back to the crypt. Completely different video. Instead of what I've been jamming, I have a stack of old school death metal albums. These are my top old school death metal albums. These are all ones that came out before I was actually born. I was born in 2003, so 20 years ago. And you know what? This can count as an old school death metal band. Gala Decapitation. But regardless, no, I don't have all my favorite top old school death metal albums ever. There are quite a few that I'm missing, like some of the old aborted stuff. Which I know is weird because they didn't necessarily start like and when everyone else was around. But regardless, then I'm gonna make a top 10 more new school sort of death metal albums. And I'm gonna say this, I chose ones that came before my time because while you could argue that some of them are still old school death metal albums because the bands have been around since the old school, they're not old school in terms of when they came out, in my opinion. To me, if they're old school death metal, I'm thinking like the 90s and whatnot. I've been kind of in a death metal mood. Then I'm gonna do a top 10 deathcore albums ever. At some point, a top 10 black metal albums, top 10 thrash albums, etc., etc. Because I need new content other than what I've been jamming, and this is in no particular order. But if you guys want me to do a certain top 10 genre for albums, let me know. With that said, first up we got Morbid Angel, Gateways to Annihilation. I love this album. This is, to me, an album that I feel is overlooked because most of the time when people think Morbid Angel, they think Altars of Madness. And yes, I do like that album. I do like Covenant. I like Blessed Are the Sick. But I mean, this might be actually a post 90s album, but that's like the one exception. I don't have a whole lot of Morbid Angel, and I don't listen to Altars of Madness as much as I do that one, so whatever. Next up, Suffocation, Pierce from Within. This is actually my favorite Suffocation album. Though it depends on the day. This is one of the first death metal albums I actually ever listened to. And I mean, Pierce from Within, Thrones of Blood, Depths of Depravity, Torn into Enthrallment, just so good. And I know a lot of people will be saying, where's this band? This was very difficult for me to make. I was sad to leave some of these albums off, and I'll do a couple honorable mentions. But Suffocation Pierce from Within. I feel like the riffs are very memorable. This can also be considered the first slamming brutal death metal album. As when I listen to this, I hear a lot of slams, and also that artwork looks very slam like. I know that's really weird to say the art. Next up is a controversial one. Possessed, Seven Churches. Yes. Um, while people may say this is a thrash metal album, I say it's death thrash, where it's because it has elements of both. And while that may sound like a completely different genre than straight up death metal, there's no denying that this was still very influential on death metal. No matter how you look at it. Um, yeah, this is what I would consider to be the classic um death metal, one of the classics in death metal. Next up, speaking of, this is Obituary, Cause of Death. I'm not the biggest Obituary fan. Um, I like them more than I did earlier this year, and I actually did like Dying of Everything a lot more than I initially thought I would. But this is a fantastic, fantastic release. Um, Everyone knows Chopped in Half, and the fact that they have a cover of Circle of the Tyrants on there is really cool as well. Cause of Death wasn't my favorite for a while, but after listening to it again, I could see why. Next up, Dying Fetus, Killing on Adrenaline. I know this may sound a bit cliche, but I would have done Grotesque Impalement, but that is an EP, and I'm doing albums specifically. And this actually has one of my favorite fucking Dying Fetus songs ever, which is Fornication Terrorists. But you also have Kill Your Mother, Rape Your Dog, Intentional Manslaughter, Procreate the Malformed. This is brutal death metal the way it should have been done. And I think a lot of people will agree with me on that. Next up. This one hurt, as this is not my favorite album from this band at all. But this was the first death metal album I not only heard, but went out and got. And this was the band that got me into the genre. And it was very influential, not only to me, but brutal death metal as well. And I hold it in a high regard. Anyway, Cannibal Corpse, Tomb of the Mutilated. I only own this and Butchered at Birth for Barnes era. And while I do like Butchered at Birth more than I did before, it is by no means necessarily my favorite death metal or Cannibal Corpse album. Of course, everyone knows Hammer Smash Face and Icon Blood, but you also have Addicted to Vaginal Skin, Split Wide Open. My favorite might be Necropedophile, Intros Ripped from a Virgin's Cunt. This is a fantastic Let's Go Death Metal release. These next two are going to be a bit controversial because they are grind of sorts, but they're still in the death metal realm. I mean, I say that if they're in the book choosing death, they're fair game. Carcass Recaputrefaction. I hate this version. I don't like not having the artwork. It's either I don't like how it has a sliver of artwork, and then this is all I get. Um, but this was what people considered the first gore grind album to be, and I definitely see it. I definitely see it. This is not my favorite Carcass album, and I've made it clear that Symphonies of Sickness is, but with that said, this is also a favorite of mine, and Symphonies of Sickness will always be my favorite Carcass. This had so much uh this did so much for the scene when it came out. Alright, 7. Next up is another grind one, Exhumed Gore Metal. This is my favorite Exhumed album, and I mean, Open the Abscess has one of my favorite fucking screams ever. Um, it's definitely not as like it's definitely grindy and whatnot, and sure, people could argue that it's just standard death grind, but this I feel like had something special when it came out. Now I don't know personally because again I'm 20 years old, but from what I've heard on that album, so good. Next up, people are probably wondering where are the Swedish bands? Entombed, Left Hand Path. I don't think I need to say much. I mean, I'm talking about old school death metal, and I only just got into it around the pandemic, so I don't know nearly as much as some of these other people do. But every song is catchy. Every song is memorable. And the buzzsaw guitar tone that became a staple amongst Swedish death metal bands is unfucking real. The artwork is perfect. This is a perfect album. I even have the light switch from the Metalhead box of this. And and I mean it's so recognizable, man. I mean, if you say you like death metal but don't like Entombed, you're fucking up. Next up is actually my favorite album from this band, and this might seem controversial because people like the later stuff, but Death, Scream Bloody Gore. Yes, I have both contenders of the first death metal album ever on here because this is so influential, and everyone knows this album. Everyone knows the art. Everyone knows what the fuck is up with this. You have songs like Zombie Ritual and Regurgitated Guts and Evil Dead that are just catchy and fun while also still shredding, and obviously this was still very early death metal. And um with that said, my my honorable mentions are as follows: Autopsy, Mental Funeral, Autopsy's Severed Survival, Immolation, Dawn of Possession, uh, Gamble Corpse with Eaten Back to Life. What was the other one? Oh yeah, Massacre from Beyond. Um, I can't think of the Unleashed album. I don't know. It doesn't matter anyway. I mean, those are my top 10 favorite death metal albums. Tell me what you guys think in the comments. Maybe it's a different list than mine. Tell me yours. Um, yeah, I mean, thank you all for watching. Thank you for subscribing, and as always, keep it grim.